Hey, what's up guys? This is Brian at WhisperStatus74. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the channel. This video is going to be a tech therapy video. This is where we do deep dives into the psychological effect of today's technology on our everyday lives. The topic for today will be Sony variable refresh rate, gaming features, and the promises of tomorrow from all the leading manufacturers. The promises that may never come. Hey, what's up guys? Thank you for joining me today. Again, this is a tech therapy video. These videos are very long, they're very in-depth, and they're meant to be a me to you, as if we're in person just having a conversation. So the updates to the Sony lineup, namely last year's 900H, this year's X90, the A80, A90, all of the HDMI 2.1 enabled displays. HDMI 2.1 will also be a topic of today's video. Obviously, we're also talking about gaming. We have a lot to cover, and I do want to start with the fact that I did a video, as well as my good friend FOMO on Tech, about 6 or 7 months ago about variable refresh rate and some of those features being taken off of Sony's website or literature. It was no longer there. It was at the time considered, we were jumping the gun, caught a lot of hate for it, but it was basically, we were premature in our reporting and it was a misprint and it's back on there. Well, apparently it's back off some of the literature and a lot of you guys are bringing it to my attention in the comments. So I was asked by many of you to cover this. Now I've gotten all kinds of comments basically saying Sony is dead to me. I'll never buy another product from them. Talks of lawsuits, all kind of that conversation. That conversation doesn't really interest me. I am here in a response to that. And typically these videos are here to bring calm. But the more I think about it and the more I talk about it with you guys, whether it's offline or on YouTube, the more confusing that it gets. We've talked many times about you've seen me on live streams on FOMO with Be the Installer and others talking about Sony being your movie platform and LG being your gaming along with Samsung. Now, Sony's not alone in these promised updates not fulfilling. We can talk about Samsung a few years ago with the Q90R eARC being promised there, being a huge feature now for those of you that have soundbars that also don't have HDMI 2.1 pass-through or even 4K pass-through. You want eARC, you need eARC, and it's not coming. There's been no discussion about it. It's not brought up because the Q90R is older at this point, but many of you actually have that panel. I fear that'll be the same with the 900H and other promises of, firmware updates and features. This whole thing with Sony reminds me how it was with Dolby Vision update. I have a Sony 900E behind me, which was never promised that update, but it did show up for the 930E, the Z9D, the 940E, the 900F without the best results. I'm actually glad the 900E never received it. It was very dark. They did update it slightly. They never went all the way back and really brightened it up. So it ended up being kind of a handicap in some ways for many of you. That's what many of you have told me in the comments. Now, as far as gaming goes, I have never really wanted to say that one is better than the other in terms of if you're going to game, you have to go with this. Right now, we're at the point where if you're going to game hard, Samsung is the way to go, and LG obviously has the most functionality with their G1, C1, CX, C9, as well as their other models. I never liked delineating that way. I always thought that Sony was good for gaming because they always had a beautiful, beautiful image, especially in game mode. Out of the box, I thought they looked fantastic. I have the A80J OLED, which is a current year model. It's upstairs at 77 inches. I've gamed on it. It's absolutely stunning out of the box. It's gorgeous. I've had no issues. Again, I'm running a PS5 on it. I've played Xbox Series X on it. I've run 4K 120. I've had no issues with it. However, Dolby Vision is not available at 4K 120, and Dolby Vision, as of now in this video, takes me out of a game mode, which is important if you want to keep input lag down and compete online. So that's already a problem. Now, the 900H was released last year. It was a mid-range panel. The challenge I had with the 900H is Sony clearly looked at that as their gaming display, which is fine. However, they did not put those features on their flagship 4K model, which was the Sony 950H. They also didn't put it on their OLED at the time, which was the AAH, or there's their ZAH, which was also HDMI 2.1, but they never promised to bring those gaming features there. For me at the time, that was very telling. What I mean by that, it was showing me where Sony placed gaming in their priorities. They put it on their lowest end panel, or lowest upper end panel, I should say, and said, hey, gamers, here's your TV, which put everybody else in a bad spot. The 950H was crippled. It didn't have the HDMI 2.1 for many gamers. The ZAH was very expensive and also wasn't promised any VRR or any of the other features, auto low latency mode, things of that nature. So it left the 900H in one spot and the 950H in a bad spot as well. Moving on, the 900H never received any of those updates. And many have also reported the 900H is 4K 120, cuts the resolution in half. I have not experienced it myself in my own home. I have seen it in person, but not at home. So I can't comment much on that. So back to the X90 and all of the Sony's lineup. This year, they've done an amazing job with the A80J, the A90J. I like the X90 a lot. I have it upstairs. The X80, X85 are their entry level, but they've had an interesting lineup. The problem is, even this year, the X90 has left on an island, as the X95 has been delayed over and over and over again. The Z9J is not here yet either. The X95, which is the replacement for last year's 950H, has kept the X90 as being a little bit too expensive. Also doesn't have the gaming features that the C1, the G1 actually have. Other companies, even Panasonic, have some form of VRR, and Sony is left without it. Now, is that a huge concern? That's what we're talking about at 6 minutes in. And I can only illustrate it this way. Yes, if you're playing a PS5, this is usually the way I'm brought this subject. They'll say, hey, I'm gaming. And I quickly want to talk about what I consider a hardcore gamer and why this is so important. When purchasing any display, especially when I am asked what I would recommend you, it's always, what is your use case? Environment is important. Where is it? Who's using it? Is it your kids? Burn-in may be a factor, but typically it's environment, but most importantly is your use case. Do you game on it? Now, what's interesting about what my guys, the people that, why you see me on live streams with FOMO, B, everybody else, we talk about if you're a hardcore gamer. Well, I consider myself a hardcore gamer. I don't game often. So hardcore gaming doesn't necessarily mean you game a lot. For me, my use case for TVs is 90% gaming. Now I'm in a home theater in my basement. I'm replacing this TV with a new panel. And I'll prove to you at the end of this video which choice I'm making for my new panel and why I'm choosing it. But for me, gaming is very, very important. And I refuse to pay more for less. Namely, the A90J costing more than the C1 and the G1 for less functionality in regards to gaming. However, I'm a hardcore gamer. And I think a lot of times people used to say, well, if you're not competitive. Well, competitive, we all play multiplayer, we play single player campaigns. If you're competitive and you're in a league and you're professional, you're probably playing on a CRT monitor. So the thing is, if you game more than 50% of the time, or that's your use case, then you should look at something that has more gaming functionality. Sony was always fine. Again, their game modes are typically gorgeous, as I've illustrated with the X90 and the A80J, which I have presently. Even the 900E's gaming was gorgeous, same with the 950H. The problem is lying with, again, HDMI 2.1. So typically now what we all do here is recommend last year's panels to save you money. Right now, that would be the Sony 950H and the AAH, and even to some degree the A9G if you want a 77-inch OLED. The 900H is pretty much selling out. It was a excellent bargain, especially at 85 and 75. But the issue has been it's not being updated with these new features yet. So it's hard for me to recommend that panel if you're waiting for it just for gaming. Circling all the way around, gaming on the A80J has been gorgeous. Typically, console games have a built-in V-Sync, so typically there isn't any real screen tearing. That is a game-by-game basis, but a lot of modern games do have built-in V-Sync. PC, you can control that with adaptive V-Sync. Again, FreeSync, G-Sync, again, if you have a monitor for that. However, LG offers G-Sync, FreeSync, VRR, so you have all three covered. You can have a PC, a PS5, an Xbox, and you're good. Sony right now offers some baseline VRR with PS5, supposedly. And the challenge I've had with other than VRR is with Ratchet & Clank, for example. And you've seen the developers do this amazing update where they had a 30 FPS version of Ratchet & Clank, which was their fidelity mode. Now you can check out Digital Foundry, did an excellent video on this. They did two, actually, and they do talk about this in their video, was that Ratchet & Clank, which had a fidelity mode, which was 4K, all the bells and whistles, but was only 30 FPS. So they updated it probably a month ago to 4K 40 FPS in fidelity mode. And a lot of you guys couldn't find that. And the reason why you couldn't find it is it's under 120 hertz option. Now this is where it gets tricky. So most of us have recommended last year's panel because you have HDMI 2.0 at least. You also have a panel that is 120 hertz. You are capped with HDMI 2.0 at 4K 60. So you should be covered because look, this is 4K 40. Unfortunately, it's considered a 4K 120 hertz container or setting, meaning they're using that bandwidth for whether it's ray tracing or anti-aliasing, whatever they're doing, whatever trickery they're doing to get you 40 FPS. You do need HDMI 2.1 for that. If you're going to use that option, now you can still go 4K 30. However, if you're going to use that option on a panel without HDMI 2.1, it actually downsamples to 1080p, which probably still looks phenomenal. The problem is when you get to panels that are as big as the 75-inch and 85-inch, 1080p doesn't look very good. And that's something that Sony has done to themselves. Now, if Microsoft had done that, I would understand. Maybe they're in league with LG, but Sony, you're in your own group. You have, I know they don't talk to each other, Sony Studios and Sony Gaming, but if the Ratchet & Clank developers, they've done such amazing jobs with their games, if any of the other developers decide to do the same thing with, say, Uncharted or Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, Ghost of Tsushima, a lot of those games were unlocked, and that's been the best thing so far, in my opinion, with the Series X and the PS5, has been these unlocked frame rates, especially with Xbox and what they're doing. However, if they follow the Ratchet & Clank developers' formula, which seems to do an amazing job, and instead of going all the way to 60, you end up at 4K 30, that is a way they may go. If you don't have HDMI 2.1, that absolutely screws you out of that extra percentage of FPS, and it's a huge difference. From 30 to 40, it feels like 60. So now it's not only VRR, it's your lack of HDMI 2.1 on last year's panel. So you have people that are coming in, they're gamers, they don't want to buy the A80, they don't want to buy the A90, they're very expensive. They're looking back to the AAH. You've also had people buy the 950H. You had them buy all these other panels that were just last year that did not have HDMI 2.1. Your HDMI 2.1, but your HDMI 2.1 panel doesn't have the features either. Now on the 900H, you will get that setting, that 120 setting. But the reason why I bring it up is it's disturbing to think that Sony, knowing a lot of their newer panels, meaning last year's, don't have HDMI 2.1, are going to be downsampled to 1080p. That's the connection that I can't make. That's the part that bothers me more than any of this variable refresh rate, G-Sync, FreeSync, auto low latency stuff. More than anything, it bothers me. I recommended those panels on gorgeous picture quality, and I rather see them enjoy at least 4K 60. Now, many of us recommended HDMI 2.0 panels because we thought they were at least going to give you 4K 60. Now, if you have a PC, 4K 60 is there, but we're talking mostly about console gamers. Now, you'll probably be fine with a Series X, but most of you that bought these Sonys really want to put them in tandem with the PS5. Now, I have no guarantee that they can't fix this or that everyone's going to follow the Ratchet and Clank developers' lead and do it this way. It's just that typically when they strike gold, they'll repeat it. So I hope that they don't, because the Ratchet and Clank update is phenomenal. It looks great and it runs fantastic, but I don't want to see any of you guys capped when you have panels that are 4K 60. They're 120 hertz, but you have the 60 cap due to HDMI 2.0. Now, back to variable refresh rate and the promises of tomorrow. I know this video is getting long. Do you need it? It's not that you need it. And do I think it's coming? Yes, I think you will see it. I think they have to deliver it. I know Panasonic has it. The question is it going to be any good? Is it going to look good? Now, the A90J, for me, again, is the panel to get, especially if you like OLEDs. I can say that even without the Z9J being released. Now, for me, having to buy a new display, the A90J was an option. The Z9J was an option. Again, this is my main home theater display. It's replacing a 77-inch LG CX. Now, because of my use case, I can't purchase those. Not just because of gaming. It's the future proofing. I have a Series X. I have a PC. I'd like to be able to use FreeSync, G-Sync, depending if I have an NVIDIA card or a AMD card. Now, those of you that have PCs know that VRR, base VRR, doesn't play nice with PCs. That G-Sync is very finicky, so is FreeSync. So you need those features if you have PC. But the Series X is really pushing the boundaries. 4K 120 on some games, Dolby Vision. Now, we don't have native Dolby Vision yet, but we will have that in upcoming games like Battlefield. For me to purchase an A90J at $8,000 and get less for my money doesn't make any sense to me. So even I, who recommend these panels every day, won't buy that panel. And even the Z9J, no matter how good that panel is going to be, it's very hard for me to recommend to somebody who's going to game pretty hard. I want to be able to enjoy Dolby Vision 120. I want to be able to see what they do with all of the upscaling and all of the different processes they have from AMD now to give you upconverted and versus having to give you native. But you may see that and may see it be 120. I want to have that option. I want to also have variable refresh rate to make sure there is no screen tearing, even though there is a built-in VSync. As we have seen, even in this generation, if you push a certain game hard enough, the frames will not sync up. I haven't seen it personally. I know Keep It Classy and Tech from KG have seen that on some of their games, which is alarming to have that happen already. Shout out to those guys, also to FOMO and to Be the Installer, but they're finding screen tearing on some newer titles or some downloadable content, which is alarming, meaning you do need it. Which I never thought I'd be saying that this early in this generation. So, should you be alarmed? No. Should Sony be held accountable? Absolutely. But the only way you can really fight back is to not buy the product. I'm not somebody who's going to sue anybody. I don't believe you can sue somebody over something like this. I think they'll deliver it. I just think that the overall theory here is don't buy anything with a promise of tomorrow. Don't buy anything if they're saying, hey, this is coming. Now, in gaming, we've been doing that for years. We've been beta testers for years. Beta testing has been in games that are being launched and unreleased, and we have this coming tomorrow. But that's just a game. That's $60. You know, consoles tend to do great and grow over time. TVs do not. But consoles are not yearly. They have a 7 or 8 year lifespan and they change with every single update. Displays don't, and they stop updating them now after a year, and it is a terrible, terrible trend. I do think Sony should be held accountable, not just for the X90 and the guys that bought now. I'm talking about those of you that bought the 900H. You bought that panel specifically for gaming. That's why they positioned it there. But back to what I said earlier, I do feel like Sony, even though games have surpassed movies in terms of overall profits, they've become the main media source for finance and success. Gaming has become that art form. Movies, I think Sony's a little archaic in their thinking, where they still feel like, hey, we're film. I'm not worried about that. We're movies. We're streaming. I want accuracy. But the fact that they put the 900H as their gaming display under its 950H, its Z or ZAH, not offering those features shows you they tried to please one part of the market. Hey, for the gamers, you don't have a lot of money? Buy this. They don't realize that gamers are the ones that aren't afraid to buy. We're the ones that buy the expensive consoles. We're the ones that spend money. We buy these PCs, we tune them up. Graphics cards are a few $1,000. GPU, CPU, memories. We spend a ton of money, $60 a game. So to undermine that and to not make it a priority is disturbing. Now, do we think it's the SoC of Sony not developing their own chip, LG and Samsung developing their own? Yes, I think that is part of it. You have to develop your own chip. I think Sony's processor is phenomenal, but we've seen what's happened with Panasonic. They are delivering it at 4K 60, and 4K 60 should be enough. However, what we're seeing now is 4K 120. We're seeing all these different games that are boosted. Now back to 4K 60. Truthfully, these consoles realistically barely do 4K 30. There's always some checkerboard rendering. There's always some kind of way to make it do 4K 60 or 4K 120. So none of us are really seeing true 4K 60 as you would see on PC. However, on PC, the Sony A90J and the they're very fickle with NVIDIA. They're very tough. 444 Chroma doesn't look great. So a lot of the things that we typically love on PC don't play well with Sony either. So that takes a lot of the PC market out. No NVIDIA G-Sync, no AMD FreeSync. So you're taking a whole group of that out. I'm part of that group. I have a 1080 Ti. I didn't get a Turing card, but I don't know what card I'll buy in the next few years. I want my panel to last a few years and play nice with my PC, especially as games get more and more demanding. 4K for me is here to stay. Pushing 8K still makes no sense to me. I don't think it even looks very good, but that's what's here. But Sony, such a lost opportunity, and to me, it's a real betrayal of your loyal customers. I think they are gorgeous. I think they made a huge jump this year with the A80, A90. I think they're phenomenal. The X90 I like very much. We have high hopes for the X95, but please add this update. I'm not doing a rant, I'm not going off, but you have people buying these panels. Gaming has become very important to many, many consumers, especially those that watch channels like mine. Gaming has become a priority. It is something that lets people get away and escape. Movies to me are becoming less and less important. 4K Blu-rays are disappearing. I have a video coming out on that as well. But for Sony, I mean, is it because you can't, or is it because it's not a priority? I think it's both, to be honest. But the fact that your PS5 crew is having developers chase HDMI 2.1 to give you 4K 40 shows me a real disconnect with them, and that they need to fix that. I don't want to see anybody with an HDMI 2.0 panel left out in the cold. Your panel has 4K 60. You should be fine. But for me, I recently ordered an 83-inch LG C1 instead of the A90J. The Z9J is not even out yet, and unless it absolutely blows my mind, it's not going to matter, because it's not going to deliver the gaming features that I personally need. And at 23 minutes, that's what this is all about, guys. It's not about listening to me or anybody else tell you what the best panel is. At the end of it, the best panel is the panel you need and the panel you want. It's the best panel for you. And Sony is knocking out a huge group of consumers that game, a huge group of consumers that prioritize gaming above all else. Now, is it actually removed from the literature of the websites? It actually doesn't even matter. The fact is, by taking this long, you've opened yourself up to this kind of criticism and this kind of ridicule, and you've lost the benefit of the doubt from so many of even your most loyal fans and clients. If the 900H crew, it's been way, way too long. They could have bought a new panel this year. And for those of you that have HDMI 2.0 panels, you're still fine. You can enjoy the majority of titles, except for one with this one small adjustment. I hope they all don't follow that. But it just is terrible because your consumers are waiting for the final form of their panels. For me, with the A90J, I just refuse to pay more money for a little bit of better picture quality, but a ton of functionality being lost, namely for the one thing I use more than anything, which is gaming. And it's terrible because I am proof. Here I am, somebody who has a channel. It's a small channel, but I talk to many of you, and a lot of times what I do helps set what you may do. And for me, even though I love Sony, I have a bunch of them in the house right now, I cannot buy one. And it's not because it's just hardcore gaming, just future proofing, and to cover all my bases with not just the PS5, but the Xbox Series X and the PC. But what I meant before about the PS5 and Ratchet and Clank, that is their company. That's where you should be most safe. That's where they should really be looking out for last year's panel. That's where you're supposed to have the PS5 work well with Sony panels. How can you take 60 FPS functionality away from those that have HDMI 2.1. That's something, or HDMI 2.0, I should say. That's something that I'm having a hard time kind of forgiving because I recommend those panels every day. All right, guys, let me know what you think in the comments, what you think all about this whole debacle of Sony HDMI 2.1. Again, it hasn't been officially pulled. It's what I'm hearing from you guys. No desire to bring clicks or anything to this channel. This is not about making you feel bad about what you bought. But what do you think about this? Is it something that's going to change your purchase? Is the picture quality good enough to limit your gaming in the future with the consoles and PC? Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Love you guys.